Phil, thank you for sitting back down with me. What are you sparking up to start the show today?
Oh, I've got a variety of things.
Hell yeah. I figured you did. You just got back from doing
Got a pre-roll in the mix.
research in
Back
pure
back from a
Michigan, right?
small vacation in Michigan.
Hell yeah. Went to the mitten. So folks, if you want to watch the video version of this podcast, there's a link in the show notes. We might I actually do have a video I might play towards the end of our conversation. And if you look at that link, you might also find any other links that we referenced during the episode, so that you can do your own research. We might reference a few. Um, and yeah, if you'd like to support the show, go to thecoldmemo.com/support. It's an easy way to support our show. You can make a contribution of your choice. Another shout out to our friend Tom G. He's a recent contributor, a recent supporter of the Cole Memo. This show is brought to you by listeners like you. Today is April 23rd, 2024, 3 days after 420. Yesterday was 422. So you could have celebrated yesterday as well. Uh, but yeah, Phil. So as you were saying, you just got back from the mitten, and I was inspired to get us together because I know you recently had like I think it was a conversation online with a stranger, and we were just talking about it. And there's this concept that people throw around called mids. Yeah, tell me your take on this subject before we dive in.
Well,
How'd you hear
how we
about it?
how we started on this
Yeah,
was someone was saying you should go to Michigan for deals on like cheaper flour and products. And this other person was like, well, if you want quality flour, you have to pay essentially Illinois prices because anything that's below like $40 an eighth or whatever is just going to be mids in quotes.
yeah,
And then I was just disputing the idea of mids as a bad thing, or that like there isn't quality in mids, but was like bringing up wine and like whiskey and like, I just think this idea that there is like the top shelf cannabis and then everything everyone where below that is just mids that are not
hmm
worth smoking or even like engaging with.
yeah. Well said. It's an interesting idea, and like another way I've talked to, I think maybe you in the past about it, but it's like if you go into, and I mean, you've got a drink right now. If you go to any liquor store, Friar Tuck's, Benny's, there are so many drinks there that you've never heard of and you don't even look at, you know? And my point is like that selection is like what makes it great. What were you gonna say?
Well, and I think like, you know, bottom shelf, middle shelf, top shelf, that comes from like the liquor industry,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So like my concept of mids, like if you compare it to like alcohol or liquor, like let's take like a big retailer like Benny's that's in Illinois. There's like the bottom shelf, and then there's the mids, which is everything else that's on the floor.
Yeah.
And if you want top shelf, that's what's like locked in a cabinet that you have to go get help with because that whiskey is like hundreds of dollars a bottle.
hmm
So that's like that's my other problem with the idea of mids is like people will shoot some example and say, well, I only get top shelf. I smoke these five or six brands or get my weed from this place. But I don't know that that's what top shelf, like, I don't know that there is a top shelf weed available.
Right.
Like it's not on the regulated market in any state, at least.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a little unfair for people to point towards, and I know that you agree with this point, but I just wanted to state it clearly. Like people point towards Illinois prices being higher. Like I know one person specifically, I'm just like, it's like a scientific experiment. I've just been watching it play out. I'm truly intrigued. They will say like, I won't purchase cannabis in Michigan because I have to purchase more. They say I have to purchase more just to get the intended effect. Whereas in Illinois, yes, I'm paying for more, but I am getting a better quality product and I know it. And they've like kind of made this a correlation with, well, it costs more because it is better. And it's like, I think it costs more because these companies are engaging in price fixing.
Well, I also think too, there's something I think like people experience with buying it, um, like if you're buying weed out of a bunch of jars and they're putting it into like these Mylar bags that are very plain, I feel like um, there's like less value implied in like that whole interaction. You know, like when I see Illinois and I see stuff purchased in Illinois, like a lot of it is like very small quantity packages of things with like a ton of branding or design on it. So it's like it's almost like buying this eighth is like such a more precious thing.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like you might even have to take it out of a box before you have to open that jar.
Right, right. Straight up. It does feel very
So
retail,
some of, I mean,
like you're going to an Apple store.
but isn't that what it is though? Like something that's top shelf, it's all about the experience.
Mm-hmm. True.
You know, like when I was over in Michigan, I got some like cheap, I think there were some ounces I wound up with that were like $70. And then on the way home, I stopped at a place that would be like higher end. This place Lifted, that's like a micro growery. It's in Buchanan, that's not too far from Illinois. I think their eighths go for like $40 normally. They were like on sale for 25. And it's like, sure, it's a little more premium product, but I don't know that it's like that big of a premium product that the price, like that it's worth paying almost $300 an ounce for that product versus like $90 an ounce for, I mean, I've had great 80 and $90 ounces,
Yeah.
like indisputably great weed.
Hmm. Yeah.
But it still sometimes just winds up being a gamble when you're buying at that price point. Like you would hope to always be able to check it out, but sometimes you're going on a reputation or a review you've read or you know.
Yeah. See it, it's interesting, and this might be anecdotal to my experience, but when I grew up and became familiar, so I actually was not familiar with the concept of like a tiered approach to cannabis. Like you just asked somebody where I lived if they had weed, and the answer was yes or no. Um, I had a friend that moved to like a bigger school. I'm from a very small town, and he moved to like a bigger school. And that was the first time I had heard. He was like, "Yeah, dude, when you buy weed, you can either get Reggie, mids, or loud, or what they also called gas." And so you
It's
have
funny
this,
though. It's funny those were your terms.
right? What were yours?
Ours were Schwag, Mersh, which stood for commercial, and then there was Kind, which was like the top shelf.
Wow, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I've heard other like dichotomies like swag and then like dro. It's like a binary approach. But yeah,
Dro was one that was in the mix for a while.
hell
Yeah.
yeah. Hell yeah. But as I got to know some of these dealers, one of the things they told me was like Reggie, yeah, was definitely like lower tier cannabis always. You buy it at a lower price. But the mids and the loud were actually just like basically the same thing, but the mids had less bag appeal. In other words, it just didn't look as good. But so it's like, but they give you this like illusion of choice. Like, well, if I want to splurge, I'll get some loud, have a good weekend. It's this
Hmm.
idea. And it really worked. I mean, it worked. And most of the time, my friend would just go and get mids. And it wasn't a thing to be ashamed of. It was like, well, I could buy some more.
Well,
Um,
even I mean, like the last like long-term dealer I had, who I bought weed from for like a decade, that was for the most part that was the case. For many, many years, he had like a mids option, which didn't have seeds in it for the most part, and was like, I mean, it got us all stoned. Like back in that day, it wasn't like you were picking strains or anything. So like
yeah.
you had that, and then you had like the good stuff, and it was always like, well, I'll smoke the good stuff when I'm going to pick up from you, but I'm just going to buy this cheaper stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But oh, I was going to say also, yeah, like because top shelf would also imply that it's like I don't know, like that it's going to be tastier or like the like I don't know how to say this, but like when like with wine or like alcohol, it's not like the top shelfness or the price point is based on the taste or the experience of it. It's based on like the rarity or the supply that exists of it and the demand that exists for that supply, you know? So like champagne is more expensive because it only comes from champagne. And there's all these like laws about how it's made and like what goes into it and the process you use. Like there not being anything in the cannabis world that's like comparable to that. Like there is no certification that's like
Right.
this is this rare weed from this part of the country grown with these genetics. So that's what I feel like is like that will be the weed that's worth 60 plus $60 or more an eighth, and everything else you buy is going to be mids, which is what we're all buying now.
It's an That's an interesting thought. Yeah, another example is like bourbon. I don't know if people know this, and I'm not super informed on alcohol, so I'm gonna like Google this really quick, but I'm pretty sure in order for something to be called a bourbon as opposed to a whiskey, it has to be aged in a barrel, like a certain type of barrel in Kentucky. Like, um,
Not quite sure about that.
yeah, I'm not either. Um,
I know stuff like that exists, but yeah, I don't know the exact standards that exist around that.
just Googling difference between, so, okay. Whiskey is a general term for an alcoholic liquor made from fermented mashed grains. Bourbon is the term for a whiskey made from a grain mixture that is at least 51% corn. So a little bit different. This is what I was thinking of, though. Bourbon was traditionally made in Bourbon County, Kentucky, and most bourbon is still produced in the state of Kentucky. So it's not like I had it a little bit wrong. It's not like it legally is required to come from Kentucky, but I think this is the
Look up
distinction.
look up Scotch though, because that actually might be related to that.
Like just look up like the definition of
Well,
Scotch
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
oh, here, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Whiskey versus whiskey, bourbon versus whiskey versus Scotch. Scotch whiskey, commonly known as Scotch, is another specific kind of whiskey. While bourbon uses corn as the primary grain, Scotch whiskey is typically made mostly of malted barley. Like bourbon, Scotch whiskey also has specific distillation methods
Okay,
and
but it's
requirements.
not like a certification thing.
No, but actually, this last part I think kind of gets to your point. Like bourbon, Scotch whiskey also has specific distillation methods and requirements.
Yeah, I mean at least that yeah, that standard is there. But yeah,
Right.
like that would be like a top shelf cannabis experience
Yeah.
would be when you have like, and not even just domestically like from California or somewhere in California, like when you're able to buy like hash from crazy parts of the world where they invented that.
Like Morocco. Or like did you know I heard
Or India
that
and Pakistan, that area.
right. I heard that Maui Wowie wasn't a strain. It was kind of what you're talking about. It was cannabis that you bought from Hawaii and it just had a distinct.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had, so if folks want to learn more about that, I'll find the episode. I had a dude on from Hawaii, awesome dude, and he talked about like because I've seen Sam and other people saying, that this legalization effort failed in Hawaii, and I'm like, what's your take on it? And he's like, I'm kind of all right that it failed because I don't know if you know this about Hawaii, but they've got medical, they've got only 8 stores, but primarily the way that people get cannabis is they are a caregiver, grow your own market. They aren't really pushing people towards the regulated sources yet. And from what I understand, this would have just made another concentrated market for adult use. And I don't believe it would have allowed home grow for everybody, but might be getting those details wrong. So, episode 78 for folks that want to check it out. I just love the fact that they are not on Cannabis 2.0 yet. They're still doing grow your own home grow. Like that's how they supply their
Yeah.
patients.
And I mean, every state should really have that kind of setup to some regard because it's how you can like at least somewhat regulate the illegal activity that's going to go on.
Right.
It's like the ultimate small business license too, just to be able to grow some plants in your house and like sell that to a half dozen people.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, it's an interesting idea. I think we're so fixated on taxing every cannabis transaction, that that's why they say that model, well, they say that cannabis 2.0 is the only model because it, you know, does have these tight regulations and it does treat cannabis as like a highly controlled substance. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had this realization the other day, this whole debate, not to take us off on too much of a tangent, but this whole debate about hemp and everything else. As we've said on the show in the past, it's like one of the only, it seems, challenges to license limitations. I realized it's the only challenge yet of the cannabis generation 2.0. And then I realized basically like the hemp farmers are arguing, it seems, for like a truly open market, but the cannabis operators are arguing for the Cole memo, cannabis generation 2.0.
Well,
They want it to be within those strictures, highly regulated.
well, and they're also arguing that like cannabis is dangerous and it's dangerous for children and like
Right.
all the shit that they said during the war on drugs.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That one, yeah, again, not to go on too much of a tangent, but the dime episode that you showed me, I'll have to link it in the podcast description, was brilliant. And I thought a really interesting point that this one person brought up when, the concern of, I don't know if it was directly oh the children, but it was basically on that subject. And he said, let me ask you this, something to the effect of, let me ask you this. What do we do with kids nowadays when they like start drinking? And I believe Brian said, age limits. And he's like, yeah, age limits. But still, when they hit that age, 21, what do? We allow them to drink, like, and they learn the lesson. Like, it's personal freedom. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have a bad time, and hopefully you learn from that, you know?
Well, and you could argue that like cannabis should almost be legal for like, I know, brain development, whatever, but like it's a drug with like if you're bowling, you have bumpers you can put on for kids. I feel like it's like a drug with bumpers.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like you can teach kids what overconsumption is and not even have them have a hangover the next day.
Right. Or not have them die, you know?
Like,
Because,
yeah, I mean, kids are gonna like do that kind of stuff anyway. I feel like they definitely shouldn't be penalized for it.
yeah. Like I said, that episode is Chris Fontes. Cannabis is already legal. Hemp versus cannabis by the dime. If people want to check it out, really interesting episode. Um, Back to the topic though of mids. Yeah, I'm just curious.
So I would say, Cole, this is a good case in point.
Mhm.
I stopped at I saw this little dispensary had been built. So I drove like 40 minutes out of the way to go visit it. And the husband and wife were there who like own it because it was 420. It was like this older couple. And I guess they were like caregivers previously. They started this little shop in this like little town in Michigan, not too far from Kalamazoo. But I'm assuming it was their first grow, so a lot of their larger nugs were like already gone. So it was a lot of like little nugs and stuff. But it smelled good. The bag appeal wasn't really there. But I grabbed like a couple ounces, and everything I've smoked from it's pretty great.
Hell yeah.
But I think like on that day, I think the most expensive ounce was like $90.
Hmm. Yeah, and I
So
mean, one thing that I don't know if people realize, I think people actually are slow. It's interesting. Some people are coming to the realization, and all it takes is some exposure to the cannabis plant. You probably know this already, Phil, but just for people that are listening, like smalls, like it's interesting. If you like harvest a cannabis plant, you realize, the nugs basically just break down into those smaller nugs. That's how they do it. And I've seen people come to that realization through whatever that GTI product is right now, that they sell the whole stem, because people are like when you actually get exposed to the anatomy of the plant, you're like, oh, this is where my nugs come from. Like, oh, this is how they break it down.
Well, and that's
You
what's
know?
funny is I feel like that's what's almost being sold as like a high-end cannabis experience now, is to just get like a cola that's been snipped off.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, I can see the one branch of the plant. I don't know that this is, it's making like a little more work for me, maybe.
Right. It's an interesting, like, I think it's just the,
But I do think like you can get straight up disappointed. Like if you buy like a prepackaged ounce of any kind and you see like popcorn kernel size popcorn. We'll call it kernels.
sure.
Like that can be a little off-putting until you grind it up and
Absolutely.
smoke it. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it can be great, but
Right.
yeah, like I was gonna have you pull up I meant to look up why I know his name before we got on here, but Ed Rosenthal.
Yeah.
I think he's like a breeder, right?
Yeah. He's like a grower of some sort. Yeah. Breeder.
Look up his Instagram.
Okay. Ed Rosenthal Instagram. I just
Because
got to
this
give a
is just like
plug.
I see images from his Instagram sometimes, and I'm like, see, that would be a high-end cannabis experience.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Like I don't see that in the regulated market in the states we're in. No, there was something else.
Whoops. Hold on a second.
Like just keep going down. I was actually thinking of like a specific.
This all looks fucking crazy.
I mean, either way, it all looks like great weed.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
was one of like a tray of just these crazy colorful buds. I mean, just click on that one there.
This one here.
Up there, that one there. Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Like
Wow.
that. If that came out of a bag,
That is crazy.
like that might be worth $60 an eighth.
Yeah. That, yeah, I
It
can
would
see
still
that.
have to have it would still, have to have some kind of story with it and some kind of branding, of course, to be like that type of premium product that's like similar in coffee or alcohol or other things.
Hmm. Hell yeah.
But like, you know,
Yeah.
so I just feel like we're like dispensaries, this regulated market, we're in this world of like everyone's disputing the differences between like maybe like Sam Adams and Coors Light.
And it starts to feel
Like it's like
very
sure Sam Adams is a craft beer,
right.
but it's not like some top shelf crazy like hard to get quality like something that's like rare.
Hmm. And it starts to feel, I know I've said this to you before on the podcast. I'm quite confident. It starts to feel kind of like a Ford versus Chevy argument. I don't know if I always say that. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. But people take that seriously. Like I know a lot of people that
Yeah, like you have a super big like affinity for one versus the other.
right. Right. And you make comments about people. This is like more than one person I know, and maybe it's anecdotal. Maybe it's just people in my area are assholes, but yeah.
Well, and then there's the idea like I've had bad experiences with Ford cars,
Mhm.
but that's just my
Yeah.
experience. Like, but that's why sometimes like you might vouch by some great grower or some great place to get your weed. Some person might be like, I had the worst experience, and that shit was mids, just because like
Hmm.
whatever they happen to get might have been bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's important to bring up another point that I've discussed on this. It's like the idea that sometimes you go to the store and the produce isn't always good. Like cannabis is produce, and I think everybody has to recognize that, there are going to be people that have their shit dialed in, but there might be days that, yeah, like you say, you could even get it from the best grower and you just get a bad batch, of strawberries, of grapes. I can't tell you how hard it is to buy like a really good bag of grapes. Really got to feel it out. I don't know.
Strawberries. I'll straight up open up multiple things of strawberries and mix myself the perfect container of them.
I was actually reading about strawberries, like I think it was this week, and they were showing they had like cut homegrown strawberries compared to like store-bought strawberries, and they were showing how the store-bought had like a lot of white in the core and the homegrown ones like had like red all the way through. I'll try to find it if I can.
Oh yeah,
Um
or if you ever go to like a farmer's market and buy some kind of like organic strawberries, like they're like a completely different fruit.
yeah. And one of the things that somebody said, I actually think found the picture, is that they purchase their strawberries based on smell. Like if they walk by the strawberries and they can like really smell them, they're like, oh, that's a good batch of strawberries. So you can see on the bottom here is what I'm talking about, like all the white, and then the
Oh yeah,
top is
yeah.
supposed to be like farm fresh. Here's another example, farm fresh
Well, probably
versus
because those like hold up a lot better in like when they're like produced industrially.
yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And I guess what I'm just trying to say is I'm not even trying to make a comment about the quality so much. I'm just trying to say I just wanted to mention that because I there's an interesting like similarity there. People are purchasing their produce by the smell. I thought that was just, that's how I purchase cannabis as well, another type of produce. The point that I was really trying to make is that, we've all gone to, you know, a store. Definitely, like it's always a store. I doubt it's at farmers markets, and you've seen like moldy fruit or whatever. You know what I mean? And if these companies are trying to be as big as they pitch themselves as, the Coca-Cola of cannabis, sometimes people say, sometimes that comes with commercialization. You know what I mean? Like variants, recalls, stuff like that, variance in quality. If you're producing at that large of a scale and you're no longer at this like artisanal farmers market scale, you know?
But that's like because they all want to be CPG companies, right?
Right.
And like flour, like I feel like now I see more people doing deli style over in Michigan than before. Like it might just be that there's more shops, so more of a variety, and where I'm stopping, they just have it. But I feel like of the 7 places I was probably this weekend, like over half of them had deli style.
Yeah. And if you could, for listeners that don't know, what's deli style versus CPG? Because I guess we didn't break that
Just
down.
that they keep it all in big jars
Right.
so that you can like stick your face in the jar.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So yeah, like you say, it's an interesting conversation playing out, and like who know, like I don't know. I'm not disputing if people have found, like, I think you even said this earlier in this today in our conversation, like, not disputing if you found a brand that works for you or whatever, like, it just really does seem that, like, I don't know. It's that whole conversation is very charged, and I don't understand exactly why. Like, it would seem that you could have like an honest conversation about it, like it could be something as easy as like fireworks, like fireworks are legal in Indiana. But what if there was like a coordinated effort to limit the number of fireworks stores to make them like, I don't know, like obviously it's honestly a great analogy actually now that I think about it, because the same things could be said about fireworks that could be said about cannabis. And I know some people will take this out of context and maybe get upset about it, but it's like some people just choose to do cannabis, some people just choose to buy fireworks. It's like it's a freedom, it's a novelty, it's like whatever, so that's why for a lot of people the issue just doesn't resonate with them. But like I don't know. Like I say, the biggest issue or the biggest thing with me in this conversation is it's interesting to me to see people like, yeah, pair that. If it costs more, it is better. And it's like, all right, like if you do believe that and feel that way and have had that experience consistently, like all the power to you. I've just taken too many like risks in Illinois, like I've a good example. I'll just like throw somebody under the bus just
Well,
for that.
but and it's before you throw someone under the bus, And it's always a gamble though, right? Like even
Right.
if you can smell and look at the weed, you might get it home and smoke it and it's nothing great or you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like this whole like top shelf premium cannabis idea, it just doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
Like I'll try it, like I'll go pay for a premium amount of weed and I'll grab a couple eighths from them because it's something like sure it might be a little more like focused and a little bit better of an experience, but it's not worth that to me because I don't think it's like really the top of what could be done, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think we know what that is. You know, at least I don't know what that is.
Right. I don't. I'll be one to admit as well. I do not know what that is. But I want to see more. I want people to be able to, express themselves. I like how Carol Ammons
Well, and
said, you could
I
express
also think
yourself through the plant, you know?
people should also just like be happy to smoke weed that gets them high
Yeah,
to a point that they're happy.
absolutely. Amen to
Like
that.
don't worry so much about it.
Right, right. If you feel good, that's what matters.
Like if you smell it and it smells like something you want to smoke and you smoke it and that experience is satisfying to you, just be happy.
Right. Hell yeah.
And if that experience wasn't satisfying to you, that doesn't mean it won't be satisfying to someone else either.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, like we talked about before, like a lot of this, like this weed is better than that weed, and all of that weed is terrible. The only good weed is this weed. I think it just dates back to like prohibition and black market and people having like better connections than other people.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's like some of that that just lingers over into this like emerging market.
Right, because if you think about it, like I know some people that do, like you said earlier, pride themselves on being able to buy the best wine or alcohol, but they are not nearly, it just doesn't seem charged like this feels where it like, you know, do you get what I'm
Well, no,
saying
and
there?
it's like it's I feel like because it's like alcohol is just so commonplace. Yeah, I don't know why people get so hung up about it on weed.
Yeah, but like you say, it's almost like this. I think something you said
But I
there
think
really,
oh, I think too though it's because we don't have like a standard definition for what good weed is.
yeah,
And like not enough people have a wide enough variety of experience to be like independently I like this or that and feel confident enough to say that no, that's good. I
right,
like that.
right. I think the best example is like I think I've seen you say like that you've bought hemp and people are like, "Oh, I've heard that that sucks." And you're like, "No, I mean it's just like the other weed I've bought from the dispensary." And it's crazy cuz yeah, the other weed at the dispensary is oftentimes hemp. So,
Well, and case in point, this the only two times I've had Super Booth are this box of pre-rolls that I got for free from a dispensary for 420
uh-huh.
from Michigan, and some hemp that I got from WNC, WNC CBD, like a producer I think out of North Carolina. Both of these products taste remarkably similar.
Interesting.
So there seems to be some truth and honesty in the hemp industry at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah. I just think that's another example though of where that permeates. Like you admitted that, well, I got this mail ordered, so they're like, if you got it mail ordered, it's hemp. Hemp equals bad. You're smoking red, you're smoking mids, like it's just interesting. So I have a interesting story for you, Phil, about license limits in the real world. And I mean like outside of cannabis. Um,
What of other industry?
well, I'm gonna give you two examples: restaurants and car washes. Okay. And I may have led you astray by how I started this, so let me just explain. Um, this is how I've got two different anecdotes of how I've witnessed. I'm calling them license limitations, but it's really just courtesy play out. in other industries. So there's this dude that I know that owns several restaurants in this area. He was going to open up a diner in the town that I live in, but so he used to own a diner in the town that I live in, but he like moved out, but he's thinking about moving back. But in the years that he's been gone, there's a town that's like 15 minutes away that has a diner, and they've really, they've established a good set of patrons from the people that lost the diner here. So he's
Mhm.
coming back into town and they catch wind of it and they're like, "Hey man, could you please not do that?" And he said, "Sure, I respect that." And so he's just not doing it. And but it's interesting. If he wanted to, he still could. I just think it's interesting that like it's just a courtesy thing in the real world. Like, or at least I know that's just a one anecdote, but I'll give you like another quick story. There's this sign up in my town. So there was a car wash. There's always been a car wash in my town, and it closed recently. But there's been a sign up that says like, "Hey, there's going to be a new car wash in town," and it's got like this name and everything. Like nice branding and stuff. But it's been up for a while, and I finally asked somebody who like knows what's going on in town. There's always somebody like that, right? And they're like, "Oh, dude, they're not building a car wash. They just put that sign up so that somebody else won't build a car wash while they're getting their stuff worked out."
See, both of those just sound like smart business moves. Like that one guy was like, well, I don't want like drama if I'm just trying to open this diner. So he'll probably open some other kind of food business or a different business entirely, or just do the diner in a town that's another 15 minutes in a different direction.
Right. Exactly. So I just thought those were interesting real world examples of how people like just deal with the issue of competition in the real world.
I mean, I'm excited to see because we drove through New Buffalo when we were coming back from Michigan, which is like right on the border
Hmm.
with Indiana. And they had like 35 dispensaries
Isn't
applied
it
to
like an
open.
hour away, less than an hour away from
Pretty much
Chicago?
an hour from it's pretty much an hour from like the Illinois Indiana border.
Okay.
So like the way edge of the city. But I just think it'll be fascinating to like see what happens with those shops. It would be fascinating if they were able to sustain the majority of them.
Yeah. Hey, you weren't the only one in Michigan for 420. Governor Pritzker went there as well to tout marijuana legalization. Did you know that?
I did see that.
You're actually the one that told me about it. I knew you knew about it. Um, just
I
wanted to
did
bring that
see
up.
that.
I thought that was funny. He also tweeted, let's see what he tweeted because he tweeted the other day. I think it was on 420. Hmm. I'll find it here in just a moment. But yeah, I think High Times just reported it. So if folks are wanting to see, on April 20th, Governor Pritzker tweeted, "To be blunt, we're proud to have sparked a new industry when we legalized adult use cannabis." So that's his 420 tweet. Hell yeah.
The only nitpicky thing I would say is, did you really start a new industry, or did
Right.
you co-opt one that already existed
Right.
and kind of like bamboozle people into thinking that you like made those people okay?
Yeah. I just, my thing with it, and I completely agree with where you're coming from on that. It just, I know I've made this point, but I just hate that it seems like our metric for successful legalization is business performance. Like he said it
Oh yeah.
himself. Like he said, I'm going to be blunt. We created a new industry. It's like, how about like credit where credit is due? You did decriminalize, possession of 30 grams or less and 15 grams or less for out of staters. I'm just making those small points.
Well, you couldn't really sell it as a personal liberty thing because people aren't really free to do too much more than they were, right?
Yeah. Well said.
So
Um,
the big deal is all the money we're raking in.
thecolememo.com/is it legal if you want to learn more about kind of the subject that we're talking about right now. different stories in which, like you just said, it's like, yeah, you've got that, but it's like a tightrope still. Yeah, you have it, but are you driving with it? Because if you're driving with it, that's a class A misdemeanor. you know, if you're on
Oh
foot and you
yeah.
have 30 grams, like you're pretty well okay. They can't fuck with you on foot, but in a car,
I
you have
mean,
different rights.
I don't know if other cannabis users in this state look behind them less, when they're driving, but like I still drive around like I did 10 years ago.
Oh, dude, for sure. I still like get a heart or like my heart drops when a police gets behind me and it's not that I'm doing anything wrong. Like I,
Or like or like at the start of your day, like just taking an open coffee with you in the car so you have like a little bit of like not that I'm smoking in the car, but I'm usually smoking in the house right before I leave. So
yeah. But yeah, I again, I know we've made this point, but my our metric for successful legalization is whether or not criminalization continues. And I think it's just interesting how that is not ever a part of the conversation. Like they do talk about the pardons, but it is crazy to me that like I don't know, I think some number of them were automatic, but it sounds like for most people like the
they weren't.
expungements.
I keep seeing all these articles. There was some article recently, like Illinois residents still waiting to get their records expunged.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was about to say is that I remember for a while, yeah, expungements you had to manually apply, and you had to pass a drug test, which colememo.com/is it legal. We did a interview with Representative Ammons. I didn't mention in that interview, but she made it. She sponsored a bill. I don't know if she like co-sponsored it or was the lead sponsor, but anyways, the bill removed the requirement to pass a cannabis drug test to get your cannabis offense expunged because that was actually a thing. I hope I said that clearly. I bounced around a little bit.
I missed it. I was too focused on these mids over here.
Oh, it's all good. It's all it's all good. It was basically just saying back in the day when we originally league quote unquote legalized it in 2020. I think up until 2021 or 22, you couldn't get your record expunged unless you could pass a drug test proving you
Oh,
hadn't smoked
yeah, yeah,
cannabis.
yeah. But they did change that, right?
Yeah, what I was saying is
Yeah.
Representative Ammons, I think co-sponsored or sponsored a bill to change that. So shout out to her for continuing to work to better the laws surrounding cannabis. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Few other things I just wanted to ask before we cut out of here. Did you see that article about Governor Pritzker being nudged by Jim Belushi to uh lower those taxes?
Oh, I did.
What do you think about that?
Thought it was kind of stupid.
Why?
Well, like the taxes are high, but if you're medical and it's super easy to get a med card, you pay like 1 or 2% taxes. So the taxes really aren't an issue. It's the base price and the problems like just the limited licensing and the overregulation in general. So like, yeah, sure, good for him for saying the taxes, but also like open up licensing. Let anyone that wants to get a license.
Right.
Come up with new classes of licensing where people can grow weed on the same side that they have their dispensary.
Yep. Yeah. Um,
I'm not going to put that on Jim Belushi, but Jim Belushi is just a guy who's just like got a bunch of money and is buying his way into the state.
yeah. When I talked about it on the show, I had like a short 420 episode, and I was like, I appreciate every and any conversation about how expensive that cannabis is in Illinois, but I just feel like you're kind of missing the mark when you blame it all on taxes because yeah, the even without taxes, as you say with a medical card, the prices are just way more expensive than they should be. Like just to give an example, the
And it's not
adult
just the
use,
prices either, it's the options too,
thank you,
like the lack of options.
lack of options, everything that goes with this market structure. I did want to just share, and I shared this I think in the 420 episode, but capital facts kind of did a follow-up to that story on cranes. Rich Miller asked Pritzker's spokesperson, Jordan Ibedea, I'm going to say, if the governor supports a cannabis tax cut. Her answer, no. And that's, I'm displaying this right now. This is
Well,
actually
and
what
I
it was
feel like
reported.
that's like the reason you're not going to see a tax cut is because the way they structured the tax, like you might see the potency tax gotten rid of. So that would be a tax cut. Um, but the base tax on flour being like 25 or 26%, like cumulative, like if you buy it in most communities, like we tax cannabis at the same rate as Michigan. Cannabis excise tax in Illinois for flour is 10%. That's the same as it is in Michigan. But they only have a 6% sales tax on top of that. We have like 10 or 11% sales tax on top of that. And then we allowed local municipalities to tack on 3% each for like your county and your city. So like who is gonna give up their cut?
Right.
I mean, Missouri has a 6% tax rate. If Illinois wanted to get competitive, they could go down to that. But I wouldn't imagine them doing that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm even like until I like that big top priority with getting more medical dispensaries or allowing dispensaries to apply for like a dual medical thing. It's like I feel like they'd either make that so cost prohibitive that people wouldn't want to do it, or like I just I don't see them like willingly being like, yeah, let's make it easier for people to buy weed at 2% tax rate.
Right. Yeah. It really does seem, as we, well, again, as Carol Ammons pointed out before the vote to legalization, that this was viewed as, the solution to a budget issue, a state budget issue. Um, so got to keep those tax dollars coming in.
Gambling too.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, This is like slightly unrelated, and I want to close out the show with, because I haven't talked about it yet. I produced the article on gifting. I'd be interested to talk to you about like what you thought about the short little article, but these are just two kind of sort of unrelated clips. This first one definitely unrelated, but you'll see like the relation, I think, to what I'm trying to bring up here, just to close our conversation about the difference between like the Illinois cannabis market and like a Michigan or something like that. Let's take a brief break and watch interview with Lena Khan, the FTC chair, to talk about oligopolies and the corporatization of America. Unfortunately, folks, YouTube asked me to pull the part that I played this clip on Jon Stewart, which I'm visually displaying right now. I'm not playing it, again, because YouTube asked me to take it down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link the full video in the show notes, and I'll just tell you the moments that I played on the show. So I played, from what I can remember, moments 1 minute 45 through 2:27, moments 10 minutes 42 through 12:25, and starting around 14:54. And let me tell you a little bit about what was discussed, just so that the point isn't completely lost. So in the first clip that I showed from this interview with Lena Khan, the FTC chair, Jon Stewart addressed the distinction between monopolies and oligopolies, highlighting that while monopolies involve one dominant company, oligopolies are a situation where a few companies control an industry, which is prevalent in this country. They raised concerns about consolidation, particularly in the entertainment industry, where six companies wield significant control. The focus then shifts to corporate behavior. And this is where Lena Khan steps in. He asks, how do you identify oligopolies? And that's where they shift to corporate behavior, emphasizing if companies if they engage in practices that are that harm consumers, suppliers, and workers with impunity. Lena identified a quote, too big to care attitude as indicative of monopoly power or oligopoly power, where companies exploit their position to mistreat stakeholders like consumers who don't have any other options. To quote her, they can start mistreating you because they know you're stuck. Does that sound familiar? It probably does, because that's exactly uh, how Illinois is. They also talk about, the industry becoming more consolidated, cornering the market, price fixing, which, some people might say that this market in Illinois, the cannabis market, is cornered and that these people are engaged in price fixing. And then, like I said, at the end, they have a conversation. John asks, um, "Are our industries becoming more consolidated today?" And Lena said, she kind of expressed what seemed like a gut feeling that larger companies are aggressively acquiring and consolidating others in pursuit of growth, which is contributing to this continued trend of consolidation. She did acknowledge the need for market specific analysis, in order to make more solidified claims, but they did cite sectors such as airlines, telecom, and meat packing, and they emphasized the negative impacts of consolidation can be seen by way of reduced competition, which adversely affects Americans and communities, and even leads to safety concerns such as airplane malfunctions. So once again, I'll have this full video linked in the show notes if you're wanting to look it up. If for some reason you're not wanting to look in the show notes and click the link, on YouTube, you can search it up. The title of the video is Lena Khan, FTC chair on Amazon antitrust lawsuit and AI oversight, The Daily Show. It looks like it was posted on April 1st, 2024 by The Daily Show. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
So what you're saying is, thank God federal prohibition still exists, because otherwise we would only have one cannabis company.
What do you mean?
No, it's like you could imagine this getting a lot worse,
Right, right.
like the amount of companies that exist in Illinois. Like you can imagine a world when this is opened up federally, that there would be like as many cigarette companies as there are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's something, they brought up media companies, but I always bring up like the food supply. I'll display the image that I always share. I think this is what it's going to look like. And if what's crazy is when you look at this looks just like if you go to boxbrown.com/MSO maps. We can go there in a moment. But like you see this map here on the right that shows like Nestle, Coca-Cola, Unilever, and then all the brands under them. I know it might be hard to see the brands, but it like gives you this illusion of choice, that these are all different brands that you're supporting. And it's like, no, it all goes back to the same companies. And it's really starting to look that way um, in cannabis. He doesn't have it laid out like all in one chart. He's got it laid out in some, you know, different like per
Well,
company.
and the annoying thing about like Illinois, just thinking about this, is like these bigger companies, like they want this CPG model. It's like you would almost wish like someone who really wanted to be like a craft producer and be on their own, that they could just like set up their own storefront and like grow shit in the back and have a consent, like there's a place called Alien something. I don't remember the rest of their name. I know there's a couple cannabis companies with that in the title, but I think they're in Kalamazoo or right around it, but they have like a consumption lounge and a grow in the same spot. And they're trying to be like a high end, like craft, small batch. Like that would be the way to like have someone be social equity and be competing with these giant companies that are able to like churn out all these edibles and vape carts and, have endless amounts of supply to compete with them.
Yeah.
But
Well
that
said.
license that doesn't even exist. That concept, that license type, that business does not exist.
Right. And I think it's just because like our definition of social equity is not that like we just have
Well,
like
and
a
you're just forcing them to compete on the same like battlefield as these big, like on their rules.
right. Right. Yeah. So it's a interesting state. Like I just think, like I said, just to kind of round out that point, like you say, they have to force play on the same set of rules, and I just think it's crazy that it's all about giving them market participation. Um, that's all the conversation is centered around, and it's like I'm not like I want to be clear, I'm for that. And actually, Shalene Title has come on the show in the past and displayed this interesting graph that showed like kind of what we were just talking about, the dispersion of companies in like the commercial market compared to the cannabis industry right now. And actually, the way that the numbers look right now is that um, we do have a more diverse industry. I want to just rephrase that. The way that the numbers look right now, because like can't like Illinois, for example, they say that they've got this diverse industry, but it's like how many people,
Yeah,
we've
where's
we've
the
said
money
this,
going?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like, it's not. I don't want to like downgrade that there's an opportunity to equalize here, but I guess to round out my point, like I said, is to get this conversation needs to include the end of the decriminalization of cannabis. I don't understand how we're talking about like basically like addressing the issues that have been caused by the war on drugs without like completely stopping that policy. It
No,
just doesn't make sense to me.
yeah, like I don't know what they really stopped arresting people for. It just seems like now they're getting them for improper transport.
Yeah, what I would call like, well, that, and then what I would call like
And they
unlicensed
let people grow
activity.
like a couple plants.
Right. But I feel like a lot of what you hear people getting in trouble for, and we didn't even cover it, but I haven't covered it yet. I've still got the stuff saved. But there was that big bust in Chicago that you told me about. And I feel like what you see now really is these like big busts for people that are like seemingly offering legitimate services like online menus, delivery, etc. And they're getting they're getting a lot of prison time for basically practicing without a license. I would say, just to be diplomatic about it, because I'm sure if given the opportunity, they would practice with a license, but they don't have that opportunity. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, and remember, we decided pre-legalization that cannabis isn't dangerous and that, no one's hurting anyone by selling black market cannabis.
right,
Let's remember that, people.
right,
I feel like there's like a whole thing now, like someone be like, well, they're selling unregulated cannabis.
exactly. No, I mean that's the
Dangerous.
basis behind.
It could kill somebody, Cole.
It's the basis behind the like buy legal argument. There's like a big push, like there's a campaign. It's like buy legal. You
I
know what
mean,
I
like
mean?
you get it. You want people to know what they're putting in their bodies, but like
Right.
I can't not see that as some kind of fear mongering. Like it's not like home distilled liquor where you could like go blind if they have done it wrong.
Right.
No one's putting fentanyl in the weed
Right.
either.
Yeah. I don't and here's what I'll say, because people have like pointed to stories in the media that suggest that. I would suggest, you know, growing your own, and if you're not able to, connecting with somebody that can. That's how you remove fentanyl from the equation. Like, um,
But there also is no fentanyl in the weed.
right. Yeah. I love that even if there was like the solution is just to go back to the old classic, grow it yourself. Um, we're displaying a picture right
I
now.
love
I don't even
I
know where
just
this is from. I think it's from New York. It says illicit cannabis is toxic.
yeah, it looks like Long Island Cannabis something organization. But just the idea of people who like supposedly support cannabis walking around being like, is that illegal cannabis? That stuff's toxic.
Right.
Like that's what people would have said in the 80s to just push prohibition.
Straight up. Or they literally did make it toxic at a certain point. What did they spray on it? The
I think it was called Parquat,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, paraquat or something like that.
Paraquat.
Here's another one in New York. We'd like your attention. Only legal cannabis dispensaries sell safe product. When you purchase from an illegal weed shop, you have no idea what you're really getting, and it may kill you.
See, I would have been the person taking a picture of this too, because this is insane.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
I and there was a story like in I don't remember what state. It might have been Florida, but it was like some mom got charged with murder because her kid ate her like Delta 8 gummies. Do you remember this?
I think I heard about that, yeah.
I don't know what the resolution, if any, has been to that, but I was like, that is just not, that cannot be what it seems. Like the kid did not die from eating Delta 8.
Yeah. The last have seen of it looks like June 12th, 2023, just based off of a quick Google. Oh, I gotta disable my ad blocker, of course. Um, it looks like the mother won't face a jury. She took a plea deal. Um, Dorothy Clements accepted a plea deal after her 4-year-old son died from eating more than a dozen Delta 8 THC edibles. She'll spend 10 years in jail.
That's insane.
Same day her son. Interesting story. I had not heard about this.
I do think
I thought
there
I
was
did.
something in the case regarding like her not being fully honest, I think.
Yeah. It says county prosecutors responded that Tanner's 116-pound weight at age 4 and lack of pediatrician visits in 2 years was a sign of child neglect. That doesn't sound like this was only due to Delta 8.
Well, I'm just like, this kid didn't die from Delta 8.
He was 116
Like,
pounds at age 4.
I I don't have kids. I don't know those metrics.
I mean, dude, I was like 120 pounds in fucking 7th grade. I may be a small kid, but you know,
Here we
I'm
go up.
sure.
Okay, go down then. I want to see the rest of the article. I think there's more here.
Yeah. Seems like that's the whole story. I don't
Oh,
know
is
if
that
this
it?
is, yeah, I don't know if this is a video on it. Sounds like that looks like an unrelated video, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's just it's one of those. It's like that those kids at the high school in Uptown. It's like we had to take kids to the hospital for this. These gummies they got at the gas station. It's the end of the world. Oh my God, we have to regulate the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like people will say like people will be like, well, no one's died from unregulated cannabis, and then people will bring up this story for the next 30 years, and I just can't believe this story at face value.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, we talked about gifting, and I felt like that would probably be a quick way to wrap up the show. I just wanted to show this video. I kind of cut it together. We've played this before on the show, but and I even think with you, Phil, but this is the first time I've kind of cut it together. I think a little bit better that it really explains like the difference. I just want to be clear to folks before we start. This is about Oregon cannabis, and Oregon is always pointed to along with Michigan as a failed way to do cannabis. And so I kind of cut together a clip from Vice News tonight that kind of shows you what the differences are, the complaints from the operators, and then quickly the consumer's side of this conversation, which I think is the most compelling part of all this. So
Oregon has had a long love affair with marijuana. So when voters passed a ballot measure legalizing it in 2014, everyone reacted about how you'd expect. A free market pot paradise was coming, especially for people who managed to get into the business early. The problem is that weed didn't stay at $1,500 a pound, or anywhere near it. Wholesale prices are down by more than 70% since the beginning of 2017. And they decided to make it as easy as possible for everyone to get in on the gold rush. Unlike in Washington and Colorado, there was no cap on the number of growers, no rules to limit production, and no restrictions on out-of-state residents. They also set the price for a license as low as $1,000, compared to tens of thousands of dollars just across the border in California. And it all worked. To create a colossal weed glut.
It did take a while before I had enough studies so I could confirm that, but I think we're getting close to say there's more weed than in our legal system being produced by our legal system than can be consumed by Oregonians.
Steve Marks, who's in charge of regulating Oregon's recreational marijuana and liquor industry.
Do you look back at it and think maybe we should have put some caps on production or on the licenses?
You know, my job's not to second guess that. I'm just the administrator, but if you're asking me, I don't think so. Everyone just wanted to be the first in, to have their stake in it, and they were willing to take the risk to be a part of that market. So I don't think that's necessarily bad. And in a control market, they'd be left out. They'd never get that chance.
When Megan Wallstatter and her husband Matt opened Pure Green, it was one of only 2 dispensaries on Sandy Boulevard in Portland. Now there are 13. One about every 1,000 feet for almost 100 blocks. People call it the Green Mile.
Well, how do you, as a retailer, feel the effects of saturation in the market?
I am constantly looking at prices. We're constantly receiving feedback from people coming into the store about what other stores are doing. We're kind of in a race to the bottom and the top at the same time. You know, there's a lot of loss leaders that are out there that are just dropping prices to have people come in.
Megan and Matt were tired of seeing their piece of the special pie shrink, so they decided to sell their business to a larger company. They're staying on as employees.
We were approached by C21, which is a Canadian company, and we have sold the store to them. And
Of course, there's one group of people who would never complain about weed market competition. People who like cheap weed.
I just bought a pre-rolled pack of joints for $16, and that is like something I would have never dreamed of.
It's great. I don't think about the expense anymore, which is super awesome, you know?
They should probably enjoy the super awesomeness while it lasts.
So, just, you know, those are the differences. People say that, I mean, would you agree, Phil? People say that Oregon was a failure because the prices got so low that people went out of business.
Well, it's funny though, because people like that place I mentioned earlier, Lifted, they sell their ounces above $200 and they're vertically integrated. They make them themselves. That has to be super profitable. Like some of them are up to like 280, you know, and then I look up like Oregon's super competitive, but Archive would be like a well-known company out there, you know, supposed to produce like great cannabis. They sell ounces for 280 out there and seemingly are able to survive. So it's like, you just need to be good.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. I never caught that before in that report, but did you notice that one producer said, I always heard it as a race to the bottom, but she said a race to the top and the bottom at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that would be what that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So I just have to share that because it's like some people don't really, I don't think, understand the difference. And like if you don't pay attention to it a lot, you may not even, I don't know, you hear licensing and some people's like eyes glaze over, you know. But it
I
really
do
is
think
just,
it's more than like my experience in Michigan is not that it's a race to the top and a race to the bottom. It's like there's a race to the top, like those small producers trying to do real craft things. But there are people that are just selling like in that high middle range too. Like they might have some very cheap options, like this place Sun Provisions I'll stop at. They grow some of their own stuff on site. They bring in some stuff that's like better quality. I think their like high end ounces were like 160, but they had some very like, stuff I probably wouldn't buy that was like, 80 I think they even were selling some deals. It was like 2 ounces for 100 or 120. So
Yeah.
like, I think people are also trying to find that like good middle range where it's not necessarily some like premium thing that they're advertising, but it's like, you know, good everyday cannabis for a slightly higher price.
Right. Yeah. And I guess just a short point I want to make. I think the only other one that I can think of right now, it's a point that you've made in the past. Like there is a space for budget cannabis. Like some people, not everybody can buy the Johnny Walker Blue every time. You know, like I've got friends that will buy, what is it, Jim Beam? Like they'll go lower than Jack Daniels. I know. How low
Well,
can
and
you go?
also there's so many, like, if you have some stuff that's like, you know, kind of unremarkable to smoke, you can always just mix a little like super tasty concentrate in there,
Right.
you know, turn it into some edibles. There's, you know, you wind up with some shitty weed. There's always something to do with it.
Yeah. You can always find something to do with it. Hell yeah. Well, close it out with gifting, right? So people might give the gift of giving. What did you think about, did you check out my article? I don't know if I even sent it to you. I know I
I
posted it
don't
on
think you did.
Patreon, but um it's a short one. I'll just go through it. It references an old article. I'll put this in the show notes, and I definitely urge people to check out this. Right here at the top is the link to the first article that inspired this article. So basically, my take on gifting and cannabis, I'm like, this seems like a straightforward question. If cannabis is legal, can I gift it? So I reached out to the state for an answer. And look, the state has already really provided an answer on this in the past. But again, if you read the story that this article is inspired off of, the references to gifting just disappeared, I'm going to say. And I'm not alleging that anything like, devious was happening. Maybe it was just like an oversight or an accidental omission, because they gladly answered this question. So the long short of it is that the state clarified that adults 21 and older are legally allowed to gift cannabis to other adults 21 years of age or older, as long as the gifted amount stays within possession limits, the personal possession limits, and no monetary exchange occurs. They also informed me that they would update their FAQ with this information within the next day or so. I'll check it out because it's been a day or so. Um, I'll check it out here in a second. But this is what I sent to the state. You know, I was basically just asking, can you confirm it's legal? If the information has been updated or revised regarding gifting, can you please provide reasons for these changes? And is there a dedicated resource or section on the CROO website where individuals can find accurate and comprehensive information about cannabis regulations, including gifting? And I just basically said that, providing this information may address any confusion. It's crucial that individuals be able to exercise their rights responsibly and in compliance with the law. Right? That's the goal here. And they responded that individuals over the age of 21 may gift so long as, like I said, the possession limits stay within that. I did find it interesting. It is not legal for dispensaries to gift cannabis. And I always wondered about that because, like, sometimes when I've been gifted cannabis from dispensaries, because I have, um, I've always wondered why they make the transaction a penny and they have a little penny jar. It's because they just like pay a penny, and that's how they didn't give it to me for free. They gave it to me for a penny, and who knows
Yeah,
who paid.
yeah.
Anyways,
I know I think in Massachusetts that was even illegal.
yeah, I don't know
You
how
weren't
that.
allowed you weren't allowed to like massively discount product to like give it away.
Yeah, like I say, it was always interesting to me how that worked. But I will also just say that, like, that's literally the model for some of the ways these events go on around, the state is these companies will sponsor them and bring their products and gift them. Um, and I've even talked to, I'm not gonna, I mean, I don't care. Like, it's not that I'm trying to save anybody or anything, but I just don't think it's particularly notable. But we've talked to one person at least that says that they, have medical patients employed because they're under the impression that they have higher possession limits and therefore can carry more and therefore can gift more, just so long as they don't exceed those individuals' possession limits, right?
Who could that be? Maybe someone who offers wedding services who could be read about in the Chicago Tribune recently.
maybe. But the state also said that, there's information on giving on Let's Talk Cannabis, and I went here. They also say neither IDFPR nor IDOA regulates cannabis gifting between private citizens. Gifting between people should comply with possession, age limits, and other requirements of state and federal law. But yeah, there's like a mention of giving here, like right here. It says giving, but it doesn't say anything under here about gifting, like literally anything there. Like it says giving at this header, but there is no other mention of gift giving, nothing anywhere else on here. That's a 1 of 1 match.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So maybe it's just an oversight again. But that's what they had mentioned, and they said that the FAQ is intended to be the dedicated resource or section on the CROO website. They actually even pasted for me what they plan to put on the website. And one of the things that many people have pointed out and asked me about, and first of all, I always have to say I'm not I'm not a legal professional and I'm not giving any legal advice, but like they've asked me, it says that you can't give away cultivated cannabis. It's like basically one of the things it expressly says. Not only can only licensed cannabis businesses, sell it, they can't gift it, but you cannot give away any home cultivated cannabis, especially by medical patients that are growing their own cannabis. They specifically mention that. And yeah, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to something earlier that I said to you, Phil. Like, we feel the need to tax every cannabis quote unquote transaction, right? And so anything stepping outside of that regulated market, they're not going to allow, and they're expressly going to mention. And I would just say that maybe you don't mention that it's home cultivated cannabis you're gifting. I don't know. I'm just joking. It's just a joke.
Your cover when you hand someone a bag of homegrown weed is just to say, no, this is from GTI.
Right. Or this is hemp. It's got a THCA sticker on it.
Yeah.
Right. Then I don't have to comply with possession limits. All right. So I just wanted to display, this is really the store, or the thing that I'm excited for. And I'm sure that maybe the state is, they watch the show. So I followed up with, and I've not heard back about this part because it's still unclear to me. I asked, what is the possession limit for registered medical patients? Do medical patients have a possession limit at home? For example, if a medical patient cultivates cannabis at home, do they need to dispose of quantities that exceed their possession limit? Or do they simply need to ensure that those quantities are, quote, secured in the home? And the reason I ask that is because Nate, the compliance officer from the office of the CROO, so kindly offered and said, feel free to reach out if you have more questions. And that's one of my number one questions. The state has talked about this in the past, and they said they can't provide it a definitive answer. I'm hoping that we can get a definitive answer. Again, this is going back to the idea that if this is supposed to be the dedicated resource or section on the CRO website where individuals can find accurate and comprehensive information about cannabis regulations, I think that simple things like that, like what is my possession limit?
Well, especially in light of that one case you covered.
Right.
Was that guy David?
Yeah. Yeah. That's another one, folks, that you can find at colememo.com/isitlegal. So
Apparently not.
Right. It's yeah. So, hopefully we get an answer on that. And I guess that's what I'll close with is like that's always been the goal with at least in the context of cannabis when I talk about this project, but pretty well with any subject that I talk about. I'm just trying to share what I learn. And I'm hoping that like particularly this type of information is helpful for people because legalization really is a tightrope, and it's crazy that can I just say this real quick? It's crazy that this is the answer to the question of is gifting legal? I have to scroll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it legal? Yes or no? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy that you know. Yeah, anyways. I get it. I think everybody gets our point at this point. So, all right, Phil. Well,
It's all very complicated.
Yeah. Seemingly more complicated than it needs to be, I guess, is the point I was trying to make there. I kind of got lost in it, but yeah. Any parting thoughts before we go, my friend?
Keep smoking them mids.
Smoking them mids. Hell yeah. All right, folks. We'll see you in the next episode of the Cole Memo. Thank you if you listened this far. Again, we'll see you on the next one. Take care.